Okay, and this and the opportunity to hear about the cardiovascular disease was presented in a deck. That deck is still available to you all, so that as Dr. Hines, who's going to come later, will speak to you, you'll have that. And you'll be able to reference it and have more information. But it's significant and important because heart disease and stroke is something that affects all Americans. It's like one of the top diseases in our country, but it affects African Americans 5 times more. And a lot of that has to do not to do with just the heart or heart condition, but some of the social determinants of health that affect our communities. So I am hopeful and thinking that that will be some of the information that Dr. Hines will speak to. But it's also that we have situations in our populations where many of us have high cholesterol, we have diabetes, we have some underlying high blood pressure and underlying conditions that also attribute to what may cause the heart disease in those situations. And Dr. Hines, who will be speaking later in a few minutes, is from VCU School of Medicine. She is an associate professor at the School of Medicine in the health policy arena. She's a native of Norfolk, Virginia, where she was in a community growing up where she recognized disparities and differences, and she carried that passion for those differences through life. She received her doctorate as well as her master's of public health from Johns Hopkins University. So we are excited and very pleased that we will have Dr. Hines joining us. And again, I'd like to say thank you to the Richmond chapter of the American Heart Association for providing us with this opportunity to hear this expert. You all, in great form, welcome her and ask her the questions that you want to have answered. And I look forward to receiving the replay and hearing what you all talked about. You're in great hands. You'll be with Mark and Japs for the rest of the evening, and I'll miss you. So long,
we'll
folks.
miss you too.
Did a fantastic, or at least from where I could see it, a fantastic introduction of Dr. Hines. We are delighted and excited that she is here. I'm going to tune out, and I'll turn it over to the very capable hands of Japs and Dr. Hines. And by all means, I'll be listening in, and any way I can support, I'm always here for you. Japs?
Thank you, Mark. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank everybody for making the time for tonight. Today's episode is about bridging the healthy equity gap in heart disease. And we have our special guest, Dr. Anika Hines, on behalf of Richmond chapter of the American Heart Association. And as she goes through some tips and some guidelines in keeping that heart healthy for us. Dr. Hines, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm so glad to be here. I'm so sorry to be tardy. As you know, I had a class that was running. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad to be here. I'm so sorry to be tardy. As you know, I had a class that was running late today, and I absolutely did not want to cancel because this is a really important topic. I'm so happy to be here with you. You also, thank you for being patient with me. So if I may share my screen, may I share my screen? I'm going to, could you enable me so I can share my screen? I have a few slides to show. Just some tips. Tonight, we're going to have a really casual conversation about healthy hearts. The American Heart Association actually has an index called the Ideal Cardiovascular Health Index. also known as the Essential Eight. It used to be called the Simple Seven, but they added another category just about 2 years ago now, I think, maybe a year and a half ago now, to include sleep as well. So we're going to go through some of those tips about healthy cardiovascular aging, and then we can have some time for some question and answer. I want to spend a little bit of time particularly on blood pressure management, because that is one condition that disproportionately affects African Americans, and it is one that puts us at higher risk for developing cardiovascular disease, as well as things like chronic kidney disease. And there's also it's tied up with diabetes as well. So in essence, managing blood pressure is key to sort of avoiding all sorts of kind of health ills. Let me see if I can share the screen now. Still disabled. But I can continue to talk while we get these slides ahead. So there are 8 categories that are covered over the Essential Eight. And so basically over time, because I think I walked in on a conversation about you guys talking to your healthcare providers about your various numbers. And so we know from the epidemiology literature that a number of different risk factors were associated with poor cardiovascular health. And so the American Heart Association came together and said, like, hey, is there a way that we can help to improve communication between doctors and their patients and kind of create a sort of way of understanding, sort of where you are in the trajectory in terms of your cardiovascular health? And so they identified 8, well, initially 7, now 8 factors, 4 behaviors and 4 health factors that allow people to kind of gauge where they are. The first of them, of course, and I guess you guys could probably guess, is healthy eating. And so we talk a lot about healthy eating with regards to increasing vegetable intake, as well as, fruits and vegetables intake. Of course, if you are already having a diabetics or a diabetes or an insulin sort of resistance issue. Of course, there's some fruits that are better to eat than others because there's still a high level of sugar content in some fruits. But we want to increase fruits and vegetables intake, lean meats as well. And then we have to pay attention to things like processed foods. We want to ensure that we're, managing our salt intake as well. And I can show you on the slides when we have them up exactly what the recommendations are. But for the most part, we want to increase vegetables and fruits, lean meats as well. And we want to reduce the number of kind of fried foods, fatty foods, the things that have high triglycerides. I see you coming on to.
If you want, if possible, you want to email them to me. Maybe I can share.
Sure.
I'll just put my email in the chat.
I can email them to you. I think if you make me a co-host, though.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, for whatever reason, we've been having a little problem. I think Japs is the host, and I'm just trying to troubleshoot. But even as the host, it's not allowing her to let you do it.
I'll shoot them right over to you.
Apologize for the interruption.
No worries. It's all good. Let me know if you're able to retrieve those.
Okay. When you sent it, it'll eventually pop in, and if you want to continue, as soon as I get them, I will post them up.
Yeah, of course. So there are so you want to enjoy the fruits and the vegetables, whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, plant-based proteins, lean animal proteins, skinless poultry, fish, and seafood. All those sound good, but you want to limit sweetened drinks. That includes, those Coke Zeros and Pepsi Zeros and all those things with all those artificial sweeteners, alcohol, sodium, red and processed meats, refined carbohydrates like added sugars and processed grain foods, full-fat dairy products, highly processed foods, and tropical oils like coconut and palm oil, even though those are some of the favorites. You also want to avoid trans fat, and particularly hydrogenated oils found in some commercial baked goods and fried foods. And it's really important to pay attention to the nutrition labels. And so, we often talk about watching calories. I think people pay attention to that a lot, but I think more so you need to understand serving sizes and keeping the portions reasonable. Because oftentimes the calorie counts are for a serving, but you might have more than one serving. You might have 4 servings in a container. So if you're thinking about, basically, counting the calories, it's not just, you have to pay attention to the labels, because oftentimes the label is showing how many calories are in a serving, and a serving might be just 1 cup, and you might have 4 cups in 1 serving. So we had a reduction regarding reducing consumption of fried foods. How often should a person consume something fried? Are there any guidelines? Well, moderation is key. And unfortunately, the older that we get, like I can't eat the same things that I could eat when I was 20, because I'm not as physically active as I was when I was 20 years old. Things don't, move as fast, and things don't process as fast as they used to. So, in terms of fried foods, we want to limit it. We want to think about, I think sometimes it can be difficult to eliminate, say, I'm never going to have cake. I'm never going to have fried chicken. I mean, I like fried chicken. I'm never going to have French fries. So that's not the key. The key is to have to use moderation. So think of things like your fried foods as treats. They're not something that you're going to eat every day. There's something that you're going to have on an occasion, and you're also going to monitor your portion size when you do so, if you're going to have that. And again, all of this I'm saying, whatever your doctor said is the right thing. But I'm telling you, in general, the general consensus is that you can consume those types of foods in moderation, but they should be like a treat. Like, like you get cake on your birthday. You don't eat cake every day necessarily, right? So think about putting things into perspective. You think of food as fuel, and so you want your staples to be like things that grow from the ground naturally, fruits and vegetables, things that are closer to the sun. The closer from the sun to the sun they are, meaning in the food chain, you have plants who have the most energy from the sun. And then, the further you go down the food chain. So animals eat plants. And so their distance from the sun is not immediate. It's because they ate it through plants, right? And so the closer you get to the sun, the more energy is basically in the food. That's a very kind of crude analogy, but basically you want to eat things that are closer to being authentically from the earth, in terms of grains and fruits and vegetables. And then you have your meats, but you want to pay attention to lean meats. That doesn't mean that you can't occasionally have your fatty things, but again, moderation is key. We don't want to eat those foods every day, not even every week for some of us. We have to pay attention. Depending on where your numbers are, some foods might just be a once a month, maybe for you. But again, it's about thinking about not limiting yourself, but creating more opportunities for yourself with regards to thinking about your body as being, you only get one. You get a single body for your whole life, and you have to kind of preserve it over time. And we do that by supporting it with fuel that provides us nutrients. So like I said, the plants and the fruits and vegetables are going to give you more energy than, say, some of the meats and definitely the processed foods. By the time you get down to processed foods, there's less and less kind of, nutrients from, original resources. Thank you. The slides are up now. Great. So if we go to slide 3, that's what we're talking about right now. You go to slide 3.
Can you hear Japs?
Is this one? This is
slide 3. Eat healthier. That's what we're talking about.
There you go.
Oh, where was that? That one. Okay, sorry.
No worries. But we're about to move on to be more active. I know that's the exciting one. Everyone loves that, right? We got to move more. We have to move more.
Jobs, if you want, maybe you can make me host, and then maybe I can drive it for you.
Okay, sorry, I'm on the be more active slide. Not sure.
Do you want to click on slideshow and then just go down to that slide just to put it in slideshow view?
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
This one? You see it now?
I do see it,
okay.
But we can view it this way. So be more active. So we want to just move more. So adults should get, and all of this information is from the American Heart Association. There are a number of different kind of fact sheets and everything that they have created in order to provide people information about how to accomplish these essential 8 goals that I mentioned before. So adults should get a weekly total of at least 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity or 75 minutes of rigorous aerobic activity. So When we're thinking about the moderate aerobic activity, those are things like water aerobics, social dancing, gardening. And when we're thinking about vigorous aerobic activity, running, swimming laps, jumping ropes, or a combination of both throughout the week. I think sometimes this is a daunting goal for people because you think like, oh, I need to set hours aside to do this. That's not the key. The key is to have bite-sized amounts of exercise and movement throughout the day. You can incorporate more exercise. For example, instead of taking the elevator, taking stairs. That'll get your heart pumping, I guarantee you. If you're parking in the parking lot, parking farther away from the door and walking more rapidly towards the door instead of finding the closest space to the door and leisurely rolling out and rolling up to the Target to make your purchases, right? Like, but there are also other, household activities, vacuuming. You can do things intentionally to increase your movement because more than anything, we want to think of it less about exercise and more about movement because the thing is we want to get our body, our heart rates pumping and up and going. And that's what's going to increase our, our cardiovascular endurance over time. So there are some tips on the side. So setting goals, keep going. Once you set a goal, keep surpassing that goal. Just walk more. Walking is actually a really healthy way to get that aerobic exercise in. People sometimes feel like you have to run, but you don't have to run. Walking can actually be as effective. And staying active. And then also, like I was just saying, add it up. So find ways to move throughout your day. And it doesn't have to be that you just set 50 minutes aside to go to the gym per se. You can do physical activity right in your home. And there are a number of activities, and the AHA has a number of different resources that can show you how you can get moving in the house, doing your regular daily activities, squatting and pushing vacuums and walking around, taking steps, walking the stairs, and so on. Next slide. I probably don't have to tell anyone to call this, but smoking is not good for us. So if we are smoking, we want to try to deal with the urges of smoking. We want to quit smoking as well as vaping and using tobacco. There are risk and health effects that will affect not only you, but also your family. Smoking can damage your circulatory system and increases your risk of multiple diseases. And I don't take this lightly because I know that, quitting smoking can be a difficult thing to do. It's a very hard habit to break. However, it's really important because tobacco use and nicotine, is a growing crisis now, especially for teenagers and young adults. But, you can also think that smoking is one of the most preventable causes of death in the U.S. Is linked to about 1/3 of all deaths from heart disease and about 90% of lung cancers. So when you put that into perspective, we can think about, okay, smoking is not in the long run beneficial to us. And there are ways that we can help to deal with the urges, for example. So it says whether physical or mental, learn your triggers. So there are certain things, and we're going to talk a little bit about stress a little bit later, but a lot of people who smoke are really stressed out and they reach for nicotine, just like any human body. When we're stressed, we reach for things like nicotine or high caloric food. We're sedentary, we watch a lot of TV, those sorts of things, all related to kind of our stress and stress management. So at the end of the day, we want to think about getting support so that we can hopefully help, to quit smoking if you're a current smoker. Next slide. Develop healthy sleeping habits. Now, this is the newest factor added to the ideal cardiovascular health index. And it's important because sleep actually affects your health, both in terms of cardiovascular disease. So most adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. So 7 to 9 is kind of the range that the AHA has determined is the healthy range for sleeping. Babies and kids need even more than that. So you see little babies, they probably need more 10 or 11 hours of sleep. But poor sleep can put you at higher risk for cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline and dementia, depression, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, as well as high cholesterol. And it's also associated with obesity. So there are things that you can do to help improve your sleep quality. How many people have, how many people would say that they get good sleep at night? Good sleep. Anyone? Some of us. How many people say that they get poor sleep at night? Poor sleep. Well, if you do, there are some ways. One is like creating a routine, right? So you have to, one is we are all connected to this technology and you have to put it away. turn off the TVs, put away the cell phones, because actually the blue light stimulates your brain and causes you not to be able to sleep for some people, right? So you want to dim your screen and use a red filter app at night. This will help you to like get rid of some of this bright blue light that most devices emit that can actually interrupt your circadian rhythm and your melatonin production that makes you feel tired. Next, you want to set alarms. Like you want to try to go to sleep if you can. Now, some of us have like interesting work schedules where you might be working late, or you go to sleep at different times. Some of us might have to sleep during the day depending on what we do. But we want to try to the extent that we can to develop a sleep routine, because your body's working in a rhythm. It's working in a circadian rhythm, and it's typically, once you get into that rhythm, you're going to be feeling sleepy at around the same time per day. You're going to be rising around the same time of day. You're not even going to need an alarm clock. Your body will just naturally awaken, right? So we want to get into a pattern where we can actually get, be rhythmic about it. So you want to set a bedtime alarm and to remind you that it's time to wrap it up for the night so that you can begin your wind down routine and get a good night's rest. And that's about it. It says like, blocking notifications. This is all having to do with technology. Now that we're in the technology age, it's a major impediment to us getting good quality of sleep. But if we think about ways that we can actually, shut off the phone and that sort of thing. And I have a big concern about my blood sugar rising while I sleep, but my A1C remains normal. Any thoughts? No, that is a good question. That is a good question. And I think, it's something that you could talk with your provider about. If you have not already, it's something maybe you want to talk to your provider about with regards to that. But if it seems that your A1C remains normal and your fasting glucose remains normal, because in the ideal 8, they're not even focused on A1C. A1C tends to be a factor that measures like fluctuations over a longer period of time, whereas like your fasting glucose is also a different indicator. But I would say if your A1C is normal and your physician says that you're fine, then maybe this is of less concern, and maybe it just has to do about when you eat and the times of day that you eat. But I would definitely check with your provider with that to see if there's any cause for concern. But if your A1C remains in the normal range and you're unmedicated, it seems like, maybe this is just kind of the way that your body's going right now. But again, check with your provider and see if there's any cause for concern, especially with regards to like fasting glucose and that sort of thing. Because it matters if you ate or if you didn't eat while you're sleeping.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, check with your
Question,
provider.
Dr.
But
Hines.
yes.
So what would you suggest would be the healthy time to go to sleep? I've heard that if you go beyond at a certain time, regardless if you slept 7 to 9 hours, you already, it still affects you in a negative way, especially with the heart. If you go, let's say, if you go beyond 12 midnight, if you always go to bed at 1, 2 a.m., that's gonna eventually take a toll on you. But what would you suggest with that?
Well, I'm not sure. So I cannot speak to, I am not sure about timing of day. I do know the total hours of sleep, but kind of is what matters. So there are definitely rhythms when you're sleeping. There are REM stages, there are different stages of sleep. And you want to make sure you get to those deepest stages of sleep, and that's where you get like the benefits of like healing and all the restorative processes and that sort of thing. So if you're not sleeping to a point where you get to the deepest stages of sleep, then maybe that's what the issue is that they're saying. I'm not sure. I have not heard that it's necessarily a particular time of day that is terrible. What it sounds like is that maybe people are concerned that if you go to sleep late at night, then maybe you won't get to some of these deeper REM kind of stages of sleep. But from what I know, there has not been advice. The emphasis is more so on the amount of sleep, because you can sleep too many hours too. But so the emphasis is on the amount of sleep, the amount of quality sleep you get, and not necessarily the time of day that you're sleeping.
Thank you for clarifying.
No problem. Okay. Our glucose. I'm sorry, I do not know about these glucose supplements. I have not. I'm sorry, I'm not a physician, and I don't know about these glucose supplements. That's something that I think you probably should check out with your provider. Next slide. Next, manage weight. I know we talk a lot about weight, and we as Black people, there's often, the statistic that there's so many Black people who are obese in the US. I think that even more so, and I think the field is moving, even though weight is highly tied to things like blood pressure, weight is often an indicator of what we're eating, in terms of the quality of our diet. But I think many would emphasize even more than the number on the scale, the being active, being healthy, eating smart, ensuring that your numbers, your triglycerides, your glucose, your blood pressure are all in normal range are, even greater indicators in terms of cardiovascular health. Now, oftentimes these things track together. So if you have high weight, if you have high BMI, often you have high blood pressure that tracks with it. You have high cholesterol that tracks with it. You have high glucose that tracks with it. But if you have these other numbers underway, under control, then I think that providers will give, kind of different advice with regards to exactly what weight is the right weight. I think the field is opening up with regards to that. Now, that does not mean that there are not, there are weights that are much, much heavier that may be to the detriment because of all of the pressure it puts on bones and joints. And also, like I said, the high blood pressure, the cholesterol, the glucose. Oftentimes those things, the fat tissue will kind of throw many of those organ systems into some sort of dysregulation that affects us more holistically. But be sure that you're checking with your provider to make sure that not just your weight, but your numbers, your blood pressure in particular, and we're going to talk about that, in your glucose and your cholesterol, according to the essential eight, are all under control. Next slide. Control cholesterol. So there are two types of cholesterol. Cholesterol is a fat-like substance that comes from two sources, food and your body. It is found in foods from animal sources only. It travels in the body by lipoproteins. That's the LDL as well as the HDL. So the HDL is what we consider, or the high density lipoproteins are what we think of as good cholesterol. So that's like olive oil, those types of things. The LDL, the bad cholesterol, that's the low density lipoproteins, are known as the bad cholesterol. That's when you're thinking about the other fried kind of foods, the animal fats, that, the lard, all these other types of fats. So HDL keeps LDL from sticking to the artery walls and reduces plaque buildup. This process can lower the risk of heart disease and stroke. So you want high HDLs, which are good, and you want low LDLs, which are bad, right? Triglycerides are the most common type of fat in the body, and your total cholesterol is your HDL level plus your LDL level plus 1/5 of the triglyceride level. And so you want to pay attention, like we were just talking about. These numbers are really important. You want to pay attention to that, and you can actually impact your cholesterol by eating smart. So again, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, plant-based proteins, lean animal proteins, fish, and seafood. And you want to limit those sugary foods and drinks, as well as those processed meats, salty foods, refined carbs, and highly processed foods. You want to move more. So you see, there's a theme here. Move more, eat more vegetables. Move more, eat more vegetables. And then you want to know your fats. You want to the extent that you can, replace saturated fats with unsaturated fats. So those saturated LDL fats, those fats that are solid at room temperature, with ones that are liquid. No nicotine, and take medication as directed. Next slide. So in thinking about managing blood sugar, and I think there was some question about glucose. So you want to understand blood glucose. The carbs and sugars in what you eat and drink turns into glucose in the stomach and digestive system, and glucose can then enter the bloodstream. So insulin is a hormone made in the pancreas that helps the body cells to take up glucose from blood and lower blood sugar levels. So, insulin is kind of the counter to the glucose. In type 2 diabetes, glucose builds up in the blood instead of floating into the cells. And, so again, you just want to track your levels. We had a little bit of a discussion about this before, but your fasting glucose should be lower than 100 milligrams per deciliter to be normal, and that's in the healthy range. Now, when you start increasing to 100 to 125 milligrams per deciliter, you're more in the pre-diabetes range, which is at risk of developing diabetes. And in the 126 milligrams per deciliter or higher, that's when you're in the type 2 diabetes range. And that's an increased risk of heart disease or stroke. And again, back to the same factors: eating smart, moving more, managing weight, and no nicotine. And again, managing weight often tracks with what you're eating. So it's really the quality of your diet that is more important than just what's on the scale, and making sure that you're getting those fruits and vegetables, those lean meats, not eating too many triglycerides and fats, and paying attention to processed foods and sugary foods as well. Next slide. So the final thing, ooh, this did not turn out well. This did not transfer well. Okay, so let's just move on. Because this is, next slide. I want to talk about blood pressure and African Americans. And this little teeny thing here, so basically you guys probably already know the blood pressure includes two readings, systolic and diastolic. The systolic is a higher number, the diastolic is a lower number. The systolic number, we'll go through exactly what these numbers mean. But what this little itty bitty diagram is kind of normal range, which has been redefined by the American Heart Association in 2017. So where it used to be under 140 over 90 was normal, 140 systolic over 90 diastolic, now it's been lowered to 130 over 80 were normal, which used to be elevated. So now they're saying that if you have a blood pressure of 130 over 80, then you're actually in the stage 1 hypertension range. Thank you so much. And then, you know, you want to be in the normal range, which is 120 over 80. They're calling elevated as 120 to 129 over 80. And the change is partially sparked by the idea that lower blood pressure in terms of getting closer to range is better. And that, you know, in decreases in your blood pressure by even 5 points, by 5 millimeters of mercury of your systolic blood pressure, can be associated with 14% lower risk of heart disease, including stroke and heart attack. So we want to think about trying to get to that number of 120 over 80 or less. You know, some folks might end up in the 120 to 129 range. Those are places where they're probably going to help you, probably going to advise you to pay attention and to make some changes in your diet. But there's been more attention in recent years paid to this 130 and over 80 category as well, because that's now technically hypertension 1. So let's talk a little bit about hypertension. Then I'm going to show you a quick video about how we're measuring blood pressure, because it matters how we measure. Next slide. Press for time here, so I won't show that. But the American Heart Association has a number of different resources that are available that will help us to, you know, kind of enrich our kind of healthy eating, physical activity. There are a number of resources, ways that you can exercise at home, doing easy things as well. You don't need a big gym. You don't need a lot of equipment. You can do things with just your body weight and still, you know, be healthy in that way. Next slide. But I want us to leave these final points. So hypertension in African Americans, I probably don't need to tell you guys this, but African American women are at a higher risk for cardiovascular disease, and its risk factors including early onset compared to white counterparts. Black people are too. It just so happens that Black people have about 60% of Black people have high blood pressure in the US. Despite higher rates of treatment, African Americans are still less likely to have their blood pressure under control. And even young African Americans, so we're talking like folks in their 30s, the risk of developing hypertension by the age of 55 is 1.5 to 2 times higher than white people of with similar blood pressure. So next slide. I want to tell you a little bit. So what is blood pressure? Blood pressure is the pressure of blood against the walls of the arteries, and the systolic is the force that is created by the heart as it pumps blood into the arteries and through the circulatory system. And the diastolic is the other force on the arteries as the heart rests between beats. So that's why you have a higher number and a lower number. The higher number is the systolic, the force as it pumps through arteries. As you imagine it squeezing, you know, you need much more force to make it through your full body, whereas the diastolic is when it rests between beats. Next slide. How often should I get my blood pressure checked? I argue that you should be checking it at home. I think that everyone should have a validated home blood pressure cuff so that we can pay attention to our blood pressure. So your doctor might take several readings over time before making a judgment about your blood pressure. And they might use an average based on 2 or more readings. And checking your blood pressure is quick and painless. You can purchase the home blood pressure cuff, as I mentioned, to keep track of a log at home, because sometimes, you might be a little bit anxious when you're going to the doctor, and actually sometimes they might send you home with something called an ABPM, which is an automated blood pressure monitor, an ambulatory blood pressure monitor that you will inflate and get multiple readings at home so they can make a diagnosis of hypertension or high blood pressure. But you can also pay attention to your own numbers by having your blood pressure cuff at home and taking it on a regular basis at around the same time every day to log to see how your numbers are trending. Do you ever need to replace the home blood pressure or have them calibrated? Now, most of the blood pressure cuffs are automated. So there are, like, especially the Omron brand, the OMRON brand in particular, it has a series of validated home blood pressure cuffs, which, the ones with the pump and, the stethoscope and the sphygmomanometer are the ones that, would need to be calibrated and things. Typically, those cuffs, I imagine that over a long period of time that they might need to be replaced, but for the most part, those digital cuffs have proven to be pretty reliable with regards to for our home blood pressure use purposes. Next slide. How can high blood pressure affect me? Left uncontrolled or undetected, high blood pressure can damage blood vessels in the body. And that's why we want to keep it under control. That's why we want to pay attention to our diet. We want to, incorporate movement. We want to ensure that we are also managing stress. And I'm going to talk about that in just one second. Next slide. And so what can you do? Don't smoke and avoid secondhand smoke. So the things that we've already been talking about today with regards to ideal 8 are actually tied into blood pressure, which is also one of the factors that we consider when we're thinking about healthy cardiovascular aging. Reach and maintain a healthy weight. Eat a healthy diet that is low in saturated and trans fats and rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and low-fat dairy products. Aim to consume less than 1,500 milligrams of salt per day. I want to talk a little bit about salt because I'm a little bit of the salt police, because sometimes I think that we forget that there are other spices in the cabinet. The salt is really meant to be an enhancer, right? So salt is not the main event. Salt is an enhancer. Salt is supposed to bring out the flavors of all the other things, so you just need a little. So I always tell people, if you're going to use salt in your food, when you're cooking your food, don't just go at it straight on with the shaker. Pour it in your hand first so you can see how much you're putting into your food when you're seasoning. Try to pinch it, taste, gradually go into the salt. Just some people jump out the gate and put lots of salt in their food, and it's not necessary. There are lots of other spices. There are other spices that are delicious and wonderful. And there's garlic powder, there's onion powder. There are things that we can use other than salt. And if it tastes salty, salt is really, and you will find that if you peel back your salt, you require less salt. But that's my soapbox for the day, guys. But anyway, so eat foods rich in potassium, except for individuals who might have kidney issues. Potassium-rich foods are not good for those individuals. And if you are facing a kidney issue, then you should talk to your provider to make sure that you're getting the dietary nutrients that you want and you're avoiding the foods that you should be avoiding, because potassium can actually be harmful to people who are dealing with kidney issues. Limited alcohol and aiming to exercise 90 to, it's really 150 minutes. I'm going to just say 150 minutes a week. Remember we said 90 if you're doing really vigorous things, Michael Phelps type swimming. But for the rest of us, 150 minutes of, aerobic exercise, walking fast, climbing stairs, vacuuming, Zumba, those types of things. And the final thing that I want to talk about, I was going to show this video about how to measure your blood pressure, but I think we're kind of, because I spend a lot of my time thinking about stress in Black people, because we know that over the course of the lifespan, Black people experience high levels of chronic stress than other groups, particularly white people. When we think about measures of dysregulation and inflammation in the body, they're actually body biomarkers that indicate that Black people have higher levels of chronic stress, which subsequently can put us not only at higher risk for development of chronic disease like cardiovascular risk because of the direct impact of stress itself, but because stress also plays into a number of the behaviors that we just discussed. What happens when you're stressed? If you're a smoker, you might want to smoke. If you're a drinker, you might want to drink. if you are, you know, someone who enjoys, not even, you don't have to even be someone who enjoys them, but naturally your body craves more high caloric food, sweeter foods, you know, fattier foods when you're under stress, and, you know, physical inactivity. Sometimes people become lethargic when they're stressed. And so for that reason, it's really important that we think about like how we're managing our stress and have coping strategies in place to ensure that we are not only, you know, protecting our bodies directly through the impacts of stress, through elevated blood pressure and stuff like things that can go out of whack over time if we are chronically stressed. You know, the systems that were designed, the stress systems that were designed to protect us can actually go into overload and harm us if we are not careful. But also because it can affect our health behavior. So in both of those ways, managing stress is really important. And so next slide, next and final slide. You know, you can focus on trying different techniques to manage your day-to-day stress. Sometimes people use, you know, counting back when you feel a stressful event. You can, you know, build healthy habits, and you can try out mindfulness practices like meditation and gratitude. Definitely, I have at home something I call a gratitude jar. And when I'm feeling particular stress, I put little notes in it about things I'm thankful for. And amazingly, I feel a lot better. Try it sometime. But there are also kind of breathing exercises. Sometimes people will use a technique where they will, you know, deep breathe for 10 seconds if they're experiencing something really stressful, and that helps them to get back to baseline. But all in all, we just need to be paying attention to taking care of ourselves and self-care, and to ensure that we get to age in terms of and healthily with regards to our cardiovascular health. Next slide. So thank you all. I hope you found some useful information. This is my contact information for my lab as well, and the work that we're doing. And I'm happy to talk to anyone, answer any questions you might have.
Yes, Dr. Hines, this is Clay Watkins. I have one final question related to stress.
Mm-hmm.
I think that my personal stress kryptonite, if you will, is snacking.
Mm-hmm.
So do you, I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask, do you think I should try to exercise more than just snack when I'm feeling stressed? I do try to choose
The
healthy
Watkins, you know
snacks.
what I'm gonna say to you. You know what I'm gonna say to you. Well, exercise instead of snacking. I would vote for the exercise.
Hmm.
I would vote for the exercise. That would be my vote. But I
Okay.
understand that on occasions maybe we do want a snack, but moderation. Because here's the thing: sometimes when we are stressed, we don't just snack; we mindlessly snack. So we
Hmm.
are having a handful of chips. We're not having, you know, whatever we're not having the 6 or 7 chips or whatever the serving size is. We're having the whole bag, and that's where it goes off the rails. You know, so and oftentimes when we're in stressful situations, it causes us to behave in those ways. We're not having just a little piece of the cake. We're gonna have a piece of the cake, right? And that is something that is we have to acknowledge, like that is how human bodies are set up. Human bodies respond to stress, and you know, when there are times of stress, oftentimes we want to gather in order to prepare for the threat, right? And part of that is sometimes overeating. So I would say if you can, I would consider maybe moving around, taking a little walk when you're stressed instead of reaching for the snacks, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes, Clay, you need to come back to aerobics.
There you have it.
Okay, Juanita.
There you have it.
I'll see you Friday.
Well, want to thank everybody. Certainly thank Dr. Hines for her time. Thank you for squeezing us in. We recognize there's a great demand on your time, and that you have you chose to certainly commit to us and give us this opportunity to hear from you so that we can grow in our physical education and understand ourselves better. I don't want to cut anybody off. I know we've stopped for time, and Lisa is very, very adamant about being punctual. So please, if you have any further comments, feel free to share them with Japs, Lisa, or I, and we will certainly email them to Dr. Hines. Now she sent me an email. I got her email. I'm
Absolutely.
kidding.
Feel free.
Yeah, we will send her whatever questions you have, but out of respect for you all and your time, I want to thank you for being here again tonight. Thank you, Dr. Hines, for a fantastic presentation. This will be recorded. It'll be available to you again. And thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you guys so much for having me. And actually, I have those some of the slides from the their flyers from their fact sheets from the AHA that I can actually send over to if people are interested in having those.
Please do share that, and we'll post them up.
Great. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Dr. Hines. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.